It's great to see so many of our dear friends and so many new friends here at Poetry at Tech tonight. It's been a great reading. I'm so excited about it. One thing's for sure, I get to read a lot of poetry in both my work and free time. And what brings me joy is going back to books I've come to love enough to just read and reread those books. Books that put me at ease, books that bring me comfort after a long day, or whose pages speak to me like an old friend who knows me well. And I'm sure many of you have those books like that you go back to again and again. But the other side of that coin is in discovering a new poet to add to my list of favorites, a poet who surprises me at every turn, one that is both instructive to the heart and to the mind, one that encourages me to see the world in a different slant of light. That poet's here with us tonight, Michael Joseph Walsh. So happy to introduce Michael Joseph Walsh. Perhaps he'll read from his hot off the presses collection, A Season. As Victoria mentioned, winner of the 2025 Georgia Poetry Prize. And speaking of his latest prize-winning work, A Season is a masterful collection of interconnected meditations. Walsh invites his reader into his lucid yet waking dream. And that's one of the great poetic achievements of this book. While we may enter the speaker's dreamlike state of questioning what is real and what is ethereal, or as we watch a single moment spread into infinity, each line is filled with the concrete images that fuel the lush landscapes or furnish the rooms of his poems. And while Walsh's poems question reality and being here or imagined anywhere, a space where the unembodied is given form, these poems remain sharp, page after page. Walsh's poems shine in their metaphorical dexterity and only become more powerful as each image builds. These poems are muscular as they dream themselves into being, which results in a reality that is both stark and elusive. Walsh's poems are wise and filled with earnest searching and discovery. Take, for example, these lines. Walsh writes, "Eventually I had to admit that in returning to my dreams, so often I was only looking for company that was the same as being alone. I had no Dallas. I'd given up thinking. I watched as one by one my past twirled back to face me, until I finally understood that I was myself the camera." Walsh's first book, Innocence, was the winner of the Lighthouse Poetry Series, and as I mentioned, his second full-length collection, A Season, is the winner of the Georgia Poetry Prize from the University of Georgia Press, and will be published this month, and many of you got an advanced copy. He's the editor of Apartment Poetry, and his poems, reviews, and translations have appeared in Brooklyn Rail, Denver Quarterly, Diagram, Guernica, all the great places. Walsh lives in Philadelphia. Please help me welcome Michael Joseph Walsh to Poetry at Tech.
Hello. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to Travis for that beautiful introduction. And thank you to Victoria and Travis for the invitation. And thank you to Laylee for reading with me. It's an honor, really an honor to read with her. So I will read exclusively from the hot off the presses, A Season. And I'm glad that Travis engaged with it so incisively in his intro. That makes things a little easier for me explaining as I go into it. So essentially the book is divided into two sections. You could think of it as two long poems. And so I'll start at the beginning with the first long poem, which is called Toccata and Fugue for the Foreigner. It is, you will not be able to see this, but it's basically made of alternating prose sections. So there's one set which I feel compelled to like show you, even though no one is going to be able to see from where you're sitting. Alternating prose sections. The first set of prose sections are not italicized and are kind of have more paragraph breaks, and then there's another set that is italicized. They're both sort of built in a kind of collage-like way out of other texts. The first non-italicized series is, I guess, in kind of a more of an expository mode, as if it were a kind of essay, but to myself, I called it a fake essay. It's sort of, they're poems. And then the other series is in a more narrative mode, kind of a dreamlike narrative mode. And those alternate with each other, and I guess they're both broadly engaged with existential questions, I suppose. I think that'll be it for the introduction to that. So I will start with the first section. Toccata and Fugue for the Foreigner. Yesterday goes forth from this moment. As a test of our astonishment, a cock crows. In this body there are head hairs, body hairs, nails, skin, teeth. Rejection on the one hand, inaccessibility on the other. The foreigner calls forth a new idea of happiness. Smear of light at horizon's commissure, a pantomime of stone lacking flesh. And how better in the end, with leasening words to replace itself. The psychotic ghost that haunts poetry is the hidden, inclusive world. As if dying instantly, the room organized itself around the angle of my head, my presumed line of sight. I was so at peace I didn't even sneeze. I thought of opium, the front part of the room, its little nip of sun. I thought about the multiplication and breeding of virtue. Was that evidence of my recovery? The nights took a long time to arrive in those days. Once, holding a familiar knife, the barber lifted my chin, and I felt like a photo of a man stretched out across some train tracks. The sun crawled out from under the blinds as if to help me remember my life. It felt a little like crying in bed. I'll just pause dramatically as I just did between sections so you know when I'm moving on. Can one be a foreigner and happy? That whirlwind translates into shrill laughter. Mountains ride on clouds, mountains walk in the sky. Painting a decayed tree and polishing a brick of dead ash. We quarrel over the words, our never having come into them. Or else we remain focused on the phenomenon of origination with regard to the body, whether the door is opened, whether the door is closed. After that, I wanted a long, sound sleep. The deleted phantasms of hope and ambition were jogging up a long, bare alley. It was a challenge to rein them in. It was like we were children trying to counterfeit ourselves. I walked at a leisurely pace. I relaxed my body until my legs were 2 columns of text on a page, until I was so at peace I could hardly bear the weight of it. That night I watched the sun go down on glass, steel, marble, money, ink. Everything right there, burning up in front of me. I smelled the earth for the first time then, like others might. In order to make up from whole cloth and identity, I stand up from my work table. A spring wind rises. That all-inclusive wind where words foment. That must indeed be called a beyond. What words for that, then? My memories of experiences when I had been abandoned, perched among words, overwhelmed me. How almost they still ring, they who are companions, movement. The vast sky does not hinder the vast sky. My memories at this point were dreams, or nearly dreams, each a pretty doppelganger of the other, and all crouched adorably, as if about to pounce. Life was more engaging now that it was filled with little dangers, and in that sense, even nausea was a pleasure. It was a posture, as sentiment is a posture, and in the end, in the cloudless dark, it was mine. It belonged to me. I was lulled, delighted. I heard the first drops of rain, which neither filled me with agony nor relieved what was there, and I kept an eye on everything, especially on how I felt. It was like looking at myself from behind. After a while, I no longer needed it, the foreboding smile of that specter in the glass, so I took a long break from the mirror. So long as my face stayed unreflected, it was flushed, prismatic. I tracked all the beautiful birds with their asymmetries reversed, clucking my tongue with pleasure as each rose up and passed away. I had externalized my demons, aestheticized them. I was my own little pet in utero. Because all moments are the time being, a paste of flowers spread sloppily across the soles of the feet. No mystery. Both blossoms and fruits maintain moments. They are a commotion. You dye the white cloud within the blue sky. In the wanderer's insane stride toward an elsewhere, blue, yellow, red, and white are mined. Intimacy renews intimacy, and unleashed eroticism is obliged to resort to new limits, those of organs, which then falter. Furthermore, just as a skilled butcher or his apprentice, having killed a cow, will sit at a crossroads, cutting it up into pieces, so the foreigner's face burns with happiness, precisely knuckled down where the faces of a boat join. I crawled into bed feeling soggy and blurry in that way. By then I knew from experience that there was nothing else I could do. My own face, I realized, was reflected in my constellation of needs, and when I closed my eyes I could see it there, floating in front of me, glowing and covered in spikes. Even a place like this, I thought, is a story that's always ending. And when I finally rose from bed, I felt odd, like I'd been bullied. I'd been so naive. The air was wet, the sky was dark. I hung my head out the window and watched two birds trace their giant arcs in front of me, suggesting the word yes with a preternatural intensity. And as they disappeared slowly into my mind's upper pool, my hum of satisfaction deepened into a cautionary roar. I was awake at this point, somewhere between laughing and crying, and for a long time after that, there was no telling where I'd be. Where am I? I'd ask, over and over, until I realized that wondering's not always wanting to know. And then I watched as that permission spread over everything, a pestilence sweetly corrupting, with tendrils that flapped like white tongues in the wind. The entire body is a mouth. I call it a red furnace. Such words are less the sign of a thing than of my distrust for them. Fleshless skeletons smeared with blood, connected with tendons. From live metaphor to dead metaphor, with the blood of the finger or the tongue, the inner work of the prosthesis resonates differently in our individual bodies. We feel the pulls of the different media, fan and mirror, blossom and fruit. They ring in the flesh for myriad miles. Eventually, I had to admit that in returning to my dreams so often, I was only looking for company that was the same as being alone. I had no telos. I'd given up thinking. I watched as one by one my past rolled back to face me, until I finally understood that I was myself the camera, that my memories' creations were destined to be my own. Snap, I said, to make it official. After that, I was whole, flush with my viewfinder, and I spent what felt like days turning that feeling over in my mind's eye like a pig on a spit. The wind was howling. The stars were volatilely arranged. To get to sleep, I'd close my eyes and imagine myself as a prelude to an exorcism, watching the world fold out into a maelstrom of wire and wood. A sheet of light spilled out of the sky one morning, and I was never the same again. I was petrichor, an apparitional surge. I was a clay head stuffed with flowers in the center of a still pool. We arrive at the concept gray, the gray point. We kill space and give light to space. In this body there are kidneys, liver, pleura, tendons, heart, spleen, and lungs. This was the soil it grew in, this the hour it bloomed. And yet I welcomed it, strangely, the sense I had that the story could all at once fade quietly out of existence into a wisp of narrative air. I'd get up to pee and return to bed, still half a creature of the dream, or else I'd remember my taste for blood, which I found had never left me. The smell of cut grass, lucidity, the cloud. I would bob in and out of the dream of the poem. I would feel the heat of the flames on my face. Everyone traded stories about an impressive yellow sunset that in my quarantine I'd somehow missed. A mound of buttered popcorn, soft, prismatic, then a green night sky shaggy with violet stars. I had the feeling then that anything could happen, that wild floodgates had opened. Every night as I slept, I felt my body rise up through what felt like hot sand, and every morning the horizon was pliant and quaking, like the skin or the muscles of the abdomen. I was convinced then, deeply, that this was knowledge of vital importance. I was song, pantomime, song, slow fire, and whenever I closed my eyes, I saw scores of old friends whom for years I'd not thought of, but whom, it turns out, I still loved. So now I'll read a bit from, I don't know how I'm doing on time, hope it's okay. I'm going to read a little bit from A Season, the second part of the book. And this is sort of deals with the same concerns, but I guess graphically these are in lines, and they have kind of a different musical structure. Okay. A Season. When for company one has one's body, its center filled up with the desire to see everyone, gradually, which is how I was made, a still flower floating, laughing and crying, the horizon of rest. And then after a while the self protests, hypoxia, notices you falling asleep, then passes by way of the flood, from knowing by nothing to experience what was there, what I could, in the unfairness of it, drive into the nose. And this panic the world could sustain, bowed, broken comfort, the splash of each misting wave. As accordingly when I was eyes and sun slamming, whether I meant to or not, as accordingly when I re-emerged, gasping on the surface by a nearly perfect hill. And then on went time, on down the days, in the bare and bleached crust of the earth, the ominous cool of the dream. And that was it, though I hardly trusted it, chewing attention while the wind slapped my hood, and the air all pollened, everywhere, at the limit of structure, a carapace in the weather's infrequent promise, and then the oddly bloodless purple of each available feeling tried on, then tossed away. For weeks the same mysterious sadness, not every day, but all around, of being taken to the hospital alive, of speaking so softly as to rarely be heard, a leaking voice, an hour as brutally compelling as a house fire or a tsunami rolling slowly into shore. That is how the day begins, with an impression as bad as the sea, and the sounds the walls feel, sounds more openly yourself than any person scattered in sun bloom. But then very suddenly you sleep. You are in a clearing. Time comes flushed with the dimples you've carved in your composite path. And in this richest of soils, unwinding suddenly back into sleep, you dream a cognitive music flares up at intervals. You dream the way teeth dream and stones, of the particular forces from which you are made, then of the people you love and have forgotten but will remember, and then of the floodgates opening in your mind's mouth, of wires in bruised orbit, of roses and a room to receive them, the dream bestowing its powers and shaping, like a snake, the swallowed world. What word is there for that? What wonder clear is this? To be woundable, finally decayed into the literature of all soils. To remember next the rain, the houses, the character of the morning seeming closer in a language you don't know, while the water runs red in slow passage in the bowels of feeling, with every burst feeling more and more some shadow, semi-snow. And behind me, what I meant to express in the arms of the promised rain, that things return the same, that which we have always remained, with eyes and mouth and hands, is the thought that thought would believe. Mouthing no and frightened, yet still under shadow, is the shock of a perfect heartbeat bearing down. But how did you do it? At night tied down, astonished, and let the surf exhale on your face, a mess of stars, a breath of vast rushed love. In all your history, slumped weirdly between brain and heart. February and cowardice, the purple watch suspension of a sunset that lasts for hours. In mythic distance, in a mouth of needles, the fruit glowing blue against what substance? The correlate of leaves. In the window, the electric air extracting value from its first pressing. And then I said to myself, I thought, having touched a great evil, having passed over a tangle of sweet grass, I wondered and ran on, having in turn been made happy, above the action still floating in cold, weird beauty, the blue autumn light. And at what immaculate odds, having primed the mind for a world, in process incompletely alive, but also childlike, gentle, sweet. Through the first real stirrings of rain, it sprung life, my absence roaring up into a halo, a throat of gauze. And this to let the walls be walls, at the edges wounded slightly, made productively sad. And the flowers too, screaming into steel blue gradients, is a job you have to do. Its bad implied permission, at the edge a still creature nesting in empty space, feeling wrong, enlivened, feeling itself the subject of a wire-like surface, a thinged prose, its mouth and eyes, and at what immaculate odds. And I think I'll close with this poem. Thank you all again for being here. But it is hard to remember. It's not so simple as that. In electric wetness, my, pushing against the wall, it was too soon for the former body, needing to breathe again, much needing flesh, as sonorous as the peeling air, which loves but will not listen, which translates the mark of the scar, without ever understanding what was good, in health or in sickness, on the basis now of swarming space, better muscled, better dreamed, or else having itself begun to unzip into the same dark fragment as, while moving, some kiss of warped light, yielding to weird silence about to vomit, the sun begins to see the one thing not yet eaten, a pearl plucked from far in the past, where there was clover growing, a deep shadow, a smile entrained on the border between this day, yesterday, the dawn, between structure and sown story based on I and this nothing, a sea inside me like in no suspended thirst. The story is, from end to end, a natural home, a life dream crossed with blood and extra light, to which I give myself in this indirect way, stretched out in the dark and aware of it, this necessary split of flower and fruit, of summer and strange spring. Thank you.